I would like to hand over the mic to the chair.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Just want to make sure that everybody is alert. So, we have a hard stop at 3:30. Another 5 minutes, okay, fine. So we'll make this short, interactive. I'm really happy to have on this stage two very diverse personalities. On one hand, we have Karthik, on the other hand, we have Vikram. So one of the first things I'd like to get started with is to understand both these as individuals first. And both of them have very specific interests in this domain of security products. So we'll understand that also a little bit. And also some parts of their journey as we would like to uncover. So I'd actually like to start, Karthik, if you can just kind of walk us through what you've been up to so, people here get the context.
Okay, thanks Vishwas. So great to be here. I think security overall is possibly the most exciting aspect of the business. For folks who've never heard about Akamai, which I assume most of the room hasn't heard about Akamai because we are a very niche B2B brand. But we, in a lot of ways, we would like to call us as the secret sauce behind the internet because we, at any point of time, we do about 1/3 of the internet traffic. 1/3 of the internet traffic runs on the Akamai platform. And if you think of any leading internet brands, whether it's a Facebook or a Google, or if you're watching the T20 cricket, you're actually watching it because of Akamai and the technology we provide. So we started fundamentally as a player that accelerates web traffic. So whatever you do on the internet, whether it's looking at a site, doing a commerce transaction, or watching a video, you do it much faster with Akamai. So the big media companies like the Googles and the Yahoos of the world signed up with Akamai. But over the last 5 years, we started a product portfolio called a web security product portfolio that has grown from zero to about $350 million in revenue over the last 5 years. So that's the reason we are here. A lot of exciting things we see on the security space. A lot of the global and Indian-based government sites, financial sites don't get into the headlines because of Akamai. Because in a lot of ways, if somebody is trying to attack them, they are attacking Akamai and taking us down rather than attacking CIA's website or some of the Indian government websites.
Right. So what is your role?
So my role is I manage the emerging business division at Akamai. So my job is to work with small, medium, and startups at Akamai and build the business for Asia Pacific. So right now, that small and medium business is one of the fastest growing segments within Asia, and we do about $30 million in run rate business.
Okay, great. Bikash, you have been an entrepreneur. But I think I want to start off because a lot of people in this room also would be entrepreneurs, right? How many of you are entrepreneurs here? So, Bikash, if you can just kind of walk us through your journey of yourself, why on the earth you decided to become an entrepreneur, and what have you been doing in this space?
Okay, so I mean, some of you told that you are entrepreneurs, and how many of you want to be an entrepreneur? Okay, there are few. So more or less, most of you guys are either in entrepreneurship or want to be an entrepreneur. So it was like early 2000. So I was there at IIT Kharagpur, and I mean, after getting into IIT, I stopped doing studies. I used to do more of things outside of studies. I used to do magic shows. I used to do painting, this, that, and all those stuff. So I liked doing something different that was kind of inside me. And I launched a website called bestfromindia.com. So that was a website to promote Indian art. And interestingly, what happened was a few of my paintings got sold. there were very good painters painting, and some guys actually, I had a few paintings within that, and some guys across the world bought that, and I made some 30,000 rupees or so out of selling paintings. But then I realized that selling paintings is probably not something which is going to make the future. So I thought, can we do something else? And I knew one guy at IIT Kharagpur, and he was from the same hall, and he was a very interesting character. He was a great hacker, and he knew people not by their names, but by their IP address. So it's like he meets somebody at the mess, and after a while he says, you know what, that guy was 10.5. So I thought maybe hacking could be an interesting space, because that was something very new, and this guy was very, very, he was one of the gurus probably in India at that point of time. So I created a strategy. I kind of worked hard on this, like how do I go and convince him to do a startup along with me? So I worked on that strategy for a day or so. And then I went to his room and told him, his name is Nilanjan, that Nilanjan, I had an idea of starting a company in the field of security and wanted to check if you want to be part of that. And then I wanted to explain him the strategy, make him excited, stuff like that. I prepared for it for a day. And he looked at me and he said, okay, let's do it. So whatever I prepared for a day, I could not even tell him. And the reason was, the reason why he could make such a quick decision, or I could make a decision to start the company, was we had absolutely no clue of how difficult it is to do a company. Okay, so we are absolutely foolish. And
so sometimes ignorance can be bliss, right?
Absolutely.
If you know everything, you wouldn't have probably started.
Absolutely, absolutely. So then we went to an organization. He hacked into every part of the organization, got the CEO's password and things like that. And then while presenting the report, we got an idea that maybe we could have tried a different way to break into. So we went and told these guys, can we try once more? And they said, okay, go ahead and try. You guys anyway broke into everything. So we went and tried that, and that worked. And that was a moment of truth for us, and we asked ourselves that when we as ethical hackers try to break into a system and find vulnerabilities, once we get success, do we try as hard as we were trying before to find the second way to break into, the 10th and the 100th? And the answer is obvious no. And during those days, ethical hacking used to be manual. So we thought, can we build, so this idea came, can we build a system which can simulate all possible attack paths? So we started, I liked artificial intelligence, so I started working on algorithms, understanding how he hacks, to build algorithms on how I can build something like Expedia, but instead of travel planning, for attack planning. So we kind of built an engine like Expedia for attack planning. And that became a very interesting intellectual property, because those who are in computer science, it's a p-space complete problem. So you can't just deal with it even easily with supercomputers. So we figured out certain way to deal with it, and we started getting a lot of awards. We got an award from Intel and UC Berkeley as one of the top 8 innovations in the world, not in security, in general. So we got an award from US Navy, etc., and things like that. And
how did you access them? I mean, you were based out of IIT Kharagpur, right?
Yeah, so IIT Kharagpur, UC Berkeley, and this and that. So they were more towards academia kind of thing. We started getting those awards. Okay. And then we had this second moment of truth. The first one was like, ethical hackers don't really solve the job. They find only partial truth. The second moment of truth was we realized that we were getting more awards than business.
More awards than business.
So
happens to few of us here as well, right?
So we are getting a lot of awards, but no business, nobody is buying. So you went and asked guys, you know what, I mean, why are you not buying it? And one of the customers told, you know what, we don't have guys to run this tool. So we thought, can we then host it online and run it for guys?
So they understood the value of it,
yeah,
but they were not buying because they were not able to utilize it. Okay.
So we just took it online and said that we are going to run it for you. And this is like early 2006 or so. Huh? Okay. And then one guy from our team came and told me, Bikash, you know what, there is something called SaaS. And he showed me SaaS, and I said, okay, that's interesting. It's called software as a service. I said, that's cool. Let's call ourselves SaaS. And that was a kind of lucky moment that we had a cool technology to simulate a human hacker, AI-based technology to simulate human hacker, sounded cool. A lot of awards from UC Berkeley, etc. And then all of a sudden a business-friendly term called SaaS. And then we got lucky and we raised the venture capital funding from IDG Ventures. We raised $4 million. And during those days, it wasn't so common that guys out of college were getting funded. I mean, that.
So how long after you got out of the college that you actually got this funding?
So in couple of years or 1.5 years or so, we got the funding. So
You were incubated at IIT Kharagpur, is that right?
the incubation process did not get started officially, but we were unofficially incubated, but officially not, because they did not start it officially at that time. So I think we were the first VC-funded company out of India, which is right out of college, probably. I don't know. So Sudhir Sethi from IDG Ventures, I am kind of very grateful that he made such a wild bet. So anyway, we started, then after fundraising, we went through our own journey, committed a lot of mistakes, but then did a few things right. We ultimately had around 500 enterprise customers, like Western Union, Sony, Oracle, ING Bank, Deutsche Bank, Daimler, that kind of enterprise guys. And we were doing their testing over the cloud. So globally, we were the first company to make ethical hacking cloud-based. Like what Salesforce did to CRM, we did the same for ethical hacking. So we went through our own evolution period, and finally last year, around a year back, we got acquired by a company called Cigital. So Cigital is one of the largest in application security space in US. So that's like the journey.
That's the one complete cycle.
Yeah, that's like one complete cycle.
College, product, co-founder,
yes,
investment, growth, and exit.
yes.
So this is very interesting, and I'm really happy to have, Bikash here to share some of the other nuggets as well. I just want to go back to Karthik. Karthik, you mentioned that in this space, you do see a lot of SMEs, as you go to the market. Now, obviously, what Vikash is trying to do is to take a sliver of a problem and build his company around it. But obviously, you guys have a much broader vision. So how do you see, because we have, and I know that we don't have too many people in this room right now, but they're recording it, and I'm sure some of the stuff that you're going to say is going to be useful to entrepreneurs who are trying to play in security space. Because you have a vantage point, could you share where do you think are the white spaces? Where do you think are the opportunities to either go on with the larger players or create smaller niches that would actually be opportunities for our entrepreneurs here?
Sure, I think, can you still hear me? Okay. So I think the way you talk about innovation, there could be innovation on multiple areas. Vishwas, we all know that. I think you built a number of companies on the B2B side. So the key is to kind of look for white spaces, either on your internal side is what innovation you bring to the market from your side, which is primarily your product or your service. So in both of the security product areas and security services areas, there are a number of white spaces that you can address. I think Bikash and I were talking about building a marketplace for security, and you take an inventory of that, at least in terms of categories, I can on the top of my head, I can think about 20 or 30 white spaces, right? There is endpoint security, there is enterprise security, there is web security, application security, and within each of these areas, from monitoring to analyzing, to detecting and mitigating. There are a number of areas that you can permutate and combine.
Are you able to hear him? Okay. All right.
I think you can't hear me next to me. Maybe there's a speaker somewhere there. So I think there is a number of areas on the product side you can innovate. And the challenge, you talked about SMEs. The challenge for SMEs, again, is they don't have the workforce a large enterprise has to implement anything that they buy. I think if you have ever implemented an SAP or an Oracle, you know the challenges of going through a large enterprise solution implementation. It's very, very complex. So on the services side, there is an opportunity for entrepreneurs to look at some of these products and specialize in these products and help SMEs and large enterprises actually implement and get value out of these products. So India, we've had a number of success stories with services. And the services market is actually larger than the product market in some way, so you can innovate around that. The third aspect is how do you go to market, right? Which is who do you sell to? size of the company, the industries you sell to, or the titles you sell to, there is opportunity for innovation. I think Quick Heal was doing the keynote in the morning. They started in an extremely commoditized space of antivirus and endpoint security, but they kind of focused on tier 2 and tier 3 markets, built that, and then went and attacked other spaces. So you typically kind of select an industry or a geography where there is no traction. Sometimes the market that is least attractive could be your opportunity. So those are things that we see day in and day out basis. But the key underlining factor is if you can build a security product that is easy to use, which could be used by SMEs and startups alike, which is easy to use and they can see value, they will go for it. Security is kind of buying insurance. You don't know why you are buying it unless something terrible happens to you. But the key thing is you want to predict that and you want to put some probability around that and you want to show the value to your customers.
Thank you. You know, you built a security product, Vikash. And you mentioned in our conversation that you focused, primarily, initially you started selling in India, but then your focus has been to sell outside of India. Just compare and contrast this customer mindsets and why have you made that decision? Because many of the product companies here are debating what is a market they should go after, what are the comparative, merits of these markets, and of course there are obviously going to be certain disadvantages or challenges when you approach different markets. Can you just kind of look at your own journey and share with us how your market positioning for your own products has evolved?
Okay, so I will slightly broaden it and answer like two things. One is a little bit on the strategic side, which is related to the product, and the other is related to the go-to-market strategy. Okay. So I'll start with the product first, and this had been one of my biggest learning of my life. And it took me a lot of time because I'm very much of an idea guy. I mean, you get an idea, I get excited. And I think all entrepreneurs are like that, right? We love ideas. I mean, we love superheroes, we like superpowers, all those cool things. So, and what we don't like is the negative people who think of problems and stuff like that. So as a society, we are a society which worships heroes. Okay, and I was also the same. So I was running after ideas, great ideas and things like that. What I did not realize is, like, imagine from the perspective of the guy who created Batman. It looks like in order to be like Batman, you should have all those cool gadgets, this, that, and all those things. But think from the perspective of the guy who created Batman. For that guy, actually it's not Batman which is the most important, but it is Joker which is the most important. If you take the supervillain out of the superhero comic, then the superhero is meaningless. Okay, and that was a big realization of my entrepreneurship journey, is that the villain matters more than the hero. Okay, you have to choose your right villain, and it took me a lot of time to figure out what is that right villain. And I see that problem with like more than 90% of the very early stage companies whom I meet, that they did not find out the right problem. So in our education system, wherever you go, and we are taught how to solve problems. We are never taught how to find problems. Okay, and that's a big, big deficiency. Finding problem that matters. Not from my perspective, but from the perspective of the guy for whom it is the problem. So one thing which we realized, now back to your question, is that when we looked at India as a market, we found like we are like the Batman, we got all these cool powers, etc. But then, I mean, nobody bothered in India, okay, because there was no Joker in India who was creating a menace. So the Batman had no value, right? So where is the Joker? So we found that the Joker is there in US, and there all these big hacking incidents are happening. If a hacking incident happens, it is mandatory, they have to disclose. The CEOs get fired because of that. So we found that the hackers are much bigger menace in US than in India. In India, you get hacked, you put it under the cover. I mean, I know companies which got bankrupt because of getting hacked, but nobody knows about it. So here, the security perception is not so critical. And secondly, the market size in terms of numbers is also much smaller. So we were lucky and unlucky both together that we created something first time in the world. That was a lucky thing. I think I'll say I was a little bit lucky. But at the same time, we were unlucky that we were based out of India. Because for a solution like that, the early adopters were actually in US who could pay us. So what we did was, we actually tried to build the company out of India, and we had our competition in US who were trying to build it out of US. They raised $35 million, $40 million, and built a far bigger company than what we could build here. Okay. So I would say that finally we had a reasonable success, but if we were in US early on, it would have made a lot bigger impact. Now I'm not discussing how to go to US, was that a question, like some of the key learning on that?
Well, you can, if you want to touch that.
I can maybe quickly summarize. That itself is like a few hours topic. So one is, if I think like, if I redo this journey once more, how will I do it? There's this movie where every day this guy can redo his previous this thing. What was that movie? No, that's Groundhog Day. Groundhog Day. Like suppose if I get a chance of like Groundhog Day. So one thing would be that I would have positioned myself in US. That's one. I would go to the valley or in US, sit there, build the team over there. That's one. The engineering team can be here. Definitely that's one thing which I would do. Second thing which I committed as a mistake during our journey was, I mean, the moment we raised money, the VC started putting pressure ki paisa chahiye, do sales, scale, etc. So one very important thing in product marketing, not sales and not services. Services is a little bit different. In product is, there's something called the sales learning curve. And one learning curve. So you have to go through and achieve that sales learning curve, and there's a test which is a little bit of, I mean, my test you can consider, and the test is that suppose you are super drunk at a bar and you meet a potential customer, and in that super drunk state you give a pitch to the customer and the customer buys it. Then you have achieved the sales learning curve. Okay?
Okay.
So that means
how many of us have done that?
Okay, so it's about that predictable thing which works. Like towards the end, what used to happen is, if like Karthik was there with me in a few meetings with customers, I would feel shy to take him because he will see me telling the same joke, pausing exactly at the same place and waiting for the guys to laugh and then start again. And it'll look like I have memorized that entire script. So you will hit a stage like that, and that's when you got the sales learning curve, and only then you should hire a VP sales. The role of the VP sales is not to discover your sales learning curve. It's the CEO's or the founding team's role. The role of the VP sales is to scale. If a VP sales could discover this, then he or she would start his or her own company. So that's one. We scaled prematurely. The third mistake which we did was, we went to US and Europe together. Later on, we shut down Europe. Okay, I hired VP sales both in US and Europe. I shouldn't have done that. So we did all these mistakes, and selling SaaS is a very different kind of stuff. At that point of time, there was only SaaS company was Zoho, and Vembu was in the US. So we had no ecosystem learning. So I mean, we committed a lot of mistakes. So these are like 3 key mistakes which I would say, and I would have focused like probably more on US. Just pick up one market, focus very heavily on that, and just do that.
Okay.
Just to complete the conversation, right? So it's an interesting debate, because I know from your journey and your perspective, I think focusing on the US for your market is interesting. But if you just, I was just reading the newspaper today, right? Dell just crossed $2 billion in revenue in India. IBM does about $4 to $5 billion revenue in India. And so does Accenture, pretty similar scale. But they do much more than what Indian companies do in India. It's an interesting question to think about, right? How do multinationals tap into the market better than Indian companies, at least in the IT scenario? So I think it's, I think in your experience, US is a great market, but I would also argue that India and potentially parts of Asia, right? Coming from India, we don't like to look at markets like China, for example. Huge regulatory market with a lot of security opportunities. We do attack surveys, and 80% of the world's attacks in some cases originate from China. But I don't think an Indian company has innovated how to solve the Chinese security problems. And then there are markets like Hong Kong, Japan, with a lot of complexity. So look east, again, could be the counterintuitive intuitive thing to do, but maybe a smart thing to do for entrepreneurs because there is a lot of opportunity. US, I would argue, is getting very crowded. You'll get better funding if you go to the US, but as a market, US is extremely crowded.
Very competitive.
Very extremely competitive. So,
good. I just want this to be a little bit of a Q&A from the group here as well. So if you got any questions, by all means, ask. This is a great time to do that. So I have one thing that I heard when I've heard about you speaking at multiple forums. So you're talking about defining the problem, right? I mean, that is one of your pet themes. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So initially, like in our journey, what we initially were doing was we thought we are going to automate ethical hacking, and that was more like network testing. Then we moved to application security testing, and eventually we kind of made it application security on demand kind of thing. So we were going idea after idea. So that was, say, one journey. Now, if I do it again once more, what I would do is I would try to figure out that which is that big pain point of the customer. And think of the idea later, which is that big pain point of the customer, and define that customer segment very narrowly. Like for example, for our case, like for application security, in US, say 8 years back, the US guys were very sensitive towards security, India was not. India today is, but not at that point of time. So who is very worried about that problem? Okay, defining that problem, and that problem should be extremely big pain for that guy. I mean, if it is not a very big pain and if that guy is not willing to pay money for it, then it's not worth solving. So once you define the problem, the next part is like solving, finding out the solution. We can also start from the idea. You can do that, you get an idea, but you can also validate key, does it really have a super villain for that? Like for example, today we were talking about some opportunities. Like I'll give you an idea about few problems. Like suppose we all are going to cloud. You have data in say Google servers or say Amazon or wherever, in Box, etc. The data could be encrypted. But the question is, who got the keys? The keys are with Google or Salesforce and all these guys. So if US government wants to look into your data, and if they force those guys to give the keys, they might have to give the keys, right? So you have the data encrypted, but that encryption only gives partial protection. You don't have control over the keys, right? So this is a problem. A lot of people feel that this is one big problem to adopt the cloud solution. So some guys figured out that this is a problem and created a solution for this where you can encrypt your data in Salesforce Cloud, but the keys are with you. Okay, now this is a solution which has a problem which is a very big problem. Or suppose DDoS, I mean they solve this DDoS problem. Any e-commerce guy, if their website is down for 3 hours, imagine the amount of money they will lose. So that's a massive problem. And then from that problem perspective, having a DDoS solution is very, very interesting. But I get a lot of ideas which people say, which looks a very nice, cool idea, but the customers are not worried about it. So you should have customers who say, really, you know what, I mean, this is like biggest pain point of my life. And that's what I'm
Good point. See, many times as entrepreneurs, we are in love with the ideas that, and then once you have the idea, and then you spend a lot of time and money building the product, and then you, like now that you have a hammer, let's find where the nails are. Yes. So many times that kind of a approach is taken, but I find it interesting that you talk about finding a problem first. Finding a problem means a customer who is having a problem. And that actually leads to product definition and vice versa. Karthik, he made a lot of comments about the Indian market, and you alluded to that a little bit. How do you see adoption of security as a thought process in Indian, commercial marketplace? Is it, just comment on that, the government and all this.
Sure, it's evolving, right? So I think when I think about 2-3 years back, I think the mentality in India, for the most part, is it will not happen to us. Nothing will happen to us. It happens in newspapers. Something has happened and people blow it up, but it's not going to happen to us. But recently, when we did an event, maybe a couple of months back, we asked room full of 120 CISOs. We asked them, how many of you were not attacked today? And not one hand went up, right? So people are getting attacked, and people are okay about it because they know it's happening every day. But the key challenge for India is, I think there was a news article today, right? India is the 118th most happy nation. So we for some reason it's strange because I would have assumed that India is happy because we are the land of yogis and whatnot, and you see very few psychological problems in this country. But it's interesting because people are more unhappy than what you assume it to be. But on the security side, people are more optimistic. On the security side, you go and ask them, hey, do you have, let's say we sell DDoS, as Bikash was saying, and you say, do you have a solution for DDoS because you're an e-commerce shop or you are a financial services shop? They said, no, we'll never get attacked. We'll never get a DDoS attack. We've never got it, and I'm sure we'll never get it. And again, one of my bosses used to say, hope cannot be a strategy, but in this case, hope is a strategy. But I see it improving. It's improving primarily because as a country, we are geo-locked by very suspicious and interesting neighbors. So for example, in Bangladesh today, somebody stole $100 million from the government, and they transferred it to Philippines of all places, because there are a couple of casinos that will accept $20–30 million in cash, and they can exchange it for some virtual goods. So interesting things are happening across our borders. There are people, when a cricket match, for example, happens, and when Rohit Sharma was given out for a no ball, a lot of people came and attacked banks in India, saying that, hey, you cheated in cricket, but we are going to take away your money. So those are interesting things happening geopolitically for us. But what you will see is, as e-commerce booms, for example, as payment technologies booms, when people know that there is money to be made, and there is quick money to be made as a criminal, and these are soft crimes with very complicated regulation laws, you will see a lot of bad guys starting to behave in very crazy ways. That's not a good thing, but that's an opportunity for entrepreneurs. Is how do you predict the joker, as Bikash was saying, and kind of pick your game and saying that, hey, here is a problem that's coming up because people are getting connected. Life is becoming virtual. Now, I think there was a photo of Mark Zuckerberg walking through a room full of thousands of people, and everybody was wearing a virtual reality desk. Virtual reality security could be an interesting thing. In the future, even dreams will be virtual, and securing the dreams could be an opportunity. Who knows?
Very interesting. So guys, we are kind of out of time. There may be time for a question or two if you have, but otherwise you can catch these two gentlemen out in the lobby. It's actually been a very interesting, two people that I have had the chance to host today. One is coming from a totally different background, is a large American company, and getting into India, looking at India as a very different perspective, and looking at opportunities and white spaces, which I think is a great, insight for some of us to take. And here we have an entrepreneur, a quintessential, mercurial, iconic person who started from college and has run the full journey of being an entrepreneur in the security space. So thank you very much, both of you, for being here today. I know it's been a short discussion, but I think it's the flavor is actually very well appreciated. And I hope you'll be able to catch some people out in the lobby and
well, thank you, Vishwas. I know you were pulled into this last minute, but again, thank you so much for.
And by the way, one thing, I'm sure most of you guys know Vishwas. So he's a great entrepreneur who had been the inspiration for a lot of next generation entrepreneurs like me. So I look up to Vishwas.
With gray hair, you can definitely claim that, right?
As inspiration. So
So this is a mutual appreciation society. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would request Mr. Vishwas.